welcome to HIV and the Media. Wow, I almost completely forgot what I was going to say, and we just went over this just a moment ago. Okay, so.
This is our moderator.
Hello! What we're doing is we're making a small recording of this so that you guys can get an idea of what all we've been talking about during the Embers of Light discussion series. This discussion series tonight is about the effects of HIV and AIDS as it's reflected in the media and the arts, and possibly in what we know of it happening behind the scenes for those who have HIV and AIDS as they work in the media and the arts. Wow, that's a mouthful. So, let me go straight to introducing people. To my, it's an L, it's a left, it's my left. To my left, we've got Patrick. Feel free to fill in the rest of the blanks.
I will. Last name.
Yeah, your last.
Traylor. I am a digital media specialist, which is a really fancy way of saying I'm into photography and videography. And I'm a multidiscipline artist. I sculpt, I illustrate, graphic design. I do pretty much everything but writing. So, I mean, I do write copy occasionally, but that's different.
We appreciate you giving us a shot.
Yeah. Hey, you know, I gotta let somebody do something.
Making some room for us. We appreciate that.
But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Oh, and I'm a dad. That's important.
It is. I've never seen anyone so in love with his daughter before. I feel bad for your wife. Barely any room.
You've met my husband.
Oh,
you
that's
really
right.
can't say
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So, to my, not an L, right. See, you were going to say left. To my right, we've got Gini.
Hi.
Fill in the blanks.
Gini Koch. I write the Alien Catherine Kitty Cat series for doll books, as well as a lot of others. I am also a parent. I didn't know that was part of this panel, or I'd have brought pictures to subject people to. My child is an adult, and she is a corporate lawyer in Los Angeles.
What's your child done?
Zero to do with our panel, but since we're talking about our kids, I love you, my chiclet.
And over on our far right, we've got Tom. Fill in the blanks.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tom Laveen. I am an author of, I think 8 or 9 novels with Random House, Simon & Schuster, and Prince of those publishers. My published work primarily right now is in young adult. I'm hoping to branch out into some adult genres like science fiction, fantasy, horror, which would be great. I also have a child and one on the way, so I'm pretty excited about that. Yeah.
And me, I'm your host. My name is Edward Pulley. I have cats.
So many.
So many cats.
So many cats.
And I am not an author. I am not a media specialist. I am a nerd. I am a nerd and miscellaneous claptrap of information stuck in my head that I can
That is
beam
how
out
I think of you, Edward, the
things.
miscellaneous claptrap.
Yeah.
Pretty much how I think of you.
Yeah, which means I can keep these guys on their toes many times.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's a basic introduction. We also have our lovely audience. Say hello, lovely audience.
Hello.
We'll cut in some audio of the audience saying hello.
We're fixing a post, right?
Yeah. So,
That's a Foley of clapping, audience applause.
glitter.
I
No.
want screams of excitement in the background, like as if it was, like Justin Bieber or One Direction coming.
Perfect.
I think we can pull that up, put that phone next to that.
Yeah. Okay.
So now, a short little introductory, because I know each one of you guys kind of have an idea of what you guys were wanting to speak about. You actually sounded very excited.
I'm excited about that.
I'm not saying that
I'm
you're
not the only one
excited.
that's excited.
I'm not saying
I
that-
have proof.
Okay, I'm trying to make him feel
Compared
special.
to
He's
ours.
over on this side of me, and so I keep on turning the wrong
Well, you
direction.
can get on the
I'm
other
not
side
going to
of
feel
it.
not special
Oh,
unless
okay.
you want to switch spots.
Wait, let's switch spots.
Okay.
I feel really
Wow.
weird on this side. I really do.
You're really weird on the other side too. We don't like
Okay.
to tell you about it, but.
Here, take my seat. It's pre-warmed.
Perfect.
Okay,
Better
so
now?
I do feel so much better, actually.
You have to come closer because he was giving me body heat. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's perpetually cold.
Yes.
So, I'm perpetually hot, so it works out.
See that? I'm refraining from all the comments I could use, but yes, you are, baby. Can we go now?
So, as far, yes. HIV and the media and the arts. what's your first impression and what that you would like to just share with everybody?
Okay, I'm going first because I'm probably the oldest in the room.
No,
That's gonna work.
because you're a lady. Ladies first.
Ladies first, okay. Right now, I think we only have really a few representations of HIV/AIDS in media. They are all, pretty much all, tragic survivors. You get the glowing death, the beloved is fighting for your rights and all this other stuff, and it's very activist in that sense that I don't feel like I feel like people will show something like Angels in America and say, stop hating on gay people. This is a horrible disease, help us fix it. But what you don't see and what isn't there yet is what I would call normal, average, regular people living their normal, average, regular lives with HIV. You can actually see that, and part of it is, I think, because we don't have a lot of movies with normal, average, regular people living with Hep C, living with cancer, living with diabetes. We don't really bring up the diseases, and in part because it's a downer.
Unless you're
Okay.
going for an Oscar.
Unless what?
Unless you're going for an Oscar.
Yes, unless you're going for an Oscar. Okay, so television, media, and books. Books can get into it a little more, but even so, I think much of it is focused on it's a dread disease and we still don't have a real cure, and so we're going to do things that show the nobleness of the person dying. Look, they were a regular person with this happy life and all this other stuff. You know, Philadelphia, for example. And now this disease has ravaged them and they've changed all the lives around them. And I mean, it's like Brian's song before it, it's a feel-good movie about a horrible disease. It's really hard to work in a dread disease into something that it's not supposed to fit into and make it seem normal. And I'm going to use an example out of my series. For the Joshua Tree Gala with Joshua Tree Feeding Program, I give away naming rights or tuckerizations to people who donate enough to the feeding program so that they get to name them. And one of the people who did that this year, I'm putting her brother into the book. Now, I can put her brother in, and he passed away from AIDS, HIV. I can put her brother into the book without a problem. He's already in, I know his character, I know who he's going to have a romantic relationship with, all of these things. Adding in that he's HIV positive, however, means I now must address it, and it doesn't really necessarily fit my series. I don't really talk about who's sick and who's not, who's walking around with the disease in this series, and all of a sudden to come to a screeching halt to have a little talk about HIV/AIDS seems like I've just added in a chapter that's a very special episode, and people don't necessarily want that. It's a difficult process to figure out how you take a dread disease like HIV, like Hep C, like cancer, or the diseases people are living with, including mental illness, which does get handled the most.
Yes.
You can write and show the crazy people, and we're all about it because they're entertaining, I guess. But all the other dread diseases that people are living with, it's difficult to work them into an average story. Even though regular people are working in their regular lives and they have these diseases, it's still hard, I think, to work it in when your stuff is not focused on the disease.
Would you argue that that is an American and or Western thing? Is that culturally just what we do? Because we still don't talk about death, we don't talk about all kinds of stuff, and we keep it as far away from us as possible. Do you think
I
that's...
can't speak to the other cultures in terms of this. I think worldwide, if you look at how people treated lepers, it wasn't like, you know, there was some nirvana where a leper got treated like a regular person. You know, that's what they are, and that's a dread disease.
Real quick, as you mentioned with mental health issues, is more, and there's an easy answer to that. You don't die from it. I mean, you can.
You can, right.
But when you get to terminal diseases, those are the ones that people
Yeah,
don't
you're gonna
know how
die.
to
You're gonna
input.
die. I mean,
Right.
no one gets
But
out
you
of here
can put
alive.
a schizophrenic in something,
Right.
and oh, that's just their character.
Or like
and
Grey
we
Gardens,
wrote-
where you had these two women who were
Right.
so mentally ill.
Let's say I would make the argument that it's less to do with somebody dying
Mhm.
or not dying,
Mhm.
and everything to do with where culturally, societally, we regard that illness. And in this country, even though there's a fairly substantial voice for the mentally ill right now, it's building, it's growing.
Yeah.
It's still not regarded by most as a valid ailment, ailment. It's because it's not tangible, because you can't see it, because it doesn't
Right.
affect your blood count or something of that nature. It's not regarded in the same way. And I only say this because my partner happens to be suffer from PTSD and some other they're tangible to me. Let me tell you,
Right.
they're tangible. And so I see that when I see how mental illness is depicted in media, it is always to entertain
Yeah.
more times than not, and not to simply be a part of the story, to
Right.
be a
I
part of the
agree.
character.
Well,
I would agree with that.
HIV, when you were describing how, they get to have the glorious, noble death and everything.
Well, it's an ugly noble death, but they're
Well,
love story.
For me,
You know,
I'll tell you how I've seen HIV
Yeah.
handled a lot of times. I get that they maybe are trying for, or on the surface it's supposed to be activist and a glorious noble death.
Mhm.
It's cheap romanticism of
Yes.
you're
I-
going
yes.
for a cheap gimmick
Love
to
story.
make us feel
Love
something.
story.
Absolutely.
Allie
Instead of
McGraw
actually making
glows
real
by
people.
she's dying, which is not realistic, but yes,
Right.
it's that kind of thing. I agree with you.
I
agree
feel
with you.
that there are times when
It's done for
even in-
melodrama. It's done for
even
melodrama.
even the show Rent, which
Mhm.
great intentions behind it.
Mhm.
There are times when I kind of roll my eyes, going, "You're just trying to make this happen
Mhm.
instead of actually letting these people be people."
It's
Right.
the easiest way to elicit a response from
Yeah.
your audience, and
It's cheap.
it's a cheap way to get the response that you want from your audience, which is to build awareness. So like some of the things that I kind of outlined were just some common shared points. So it's often depicted in a negative light. It's not necessarily like that
depicted
AIDS
as
is
a
real
death
bad.
sentence. It's depicted as a
Exactly.
death sentence.
And so it's always attached to tragedy, like you were saying. So as you were talking, like those were the things that I was
Yeah.
thinking exactly. It is also often tied to the LGBTQ community, and not. So when you're talking about the normalization and the moving away from that stigmatization, it's not going to happen until everyone outside of the LGBTQ community can see that that's not the only community that's affected.
Mhm.
And it's not just their supposed deviant behavior. It's not just drug use. It's through a multitude of things that can have somebody.
You know, which is funny, because I remember when this virus came out and when it hit and everything else, and how it was, it's the deviant gays and it's the drug
Mhm.
users, and then we had Ryan White, and Ryan White's life and death was supposed to have taught us that this affects anybody, and all it taught us was that we have to be really careful with screening people giving blood. And then there are other people that have this, that are straight, that have never had a gay relationship, that are not intravenous drug users, and we don't do stuff about them because, again, it's not, they're still one-offs. It can affect everyone. I mean, Magic got AIDS, and that was also supposed to normalize it, and it did help. It
But
helped
they s-
dramatically, but
they
it's
still tie it to salacious behavior.
Yes, because he was catting around.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
even like
Yeah.
the Dallas Buyers Club.
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey was, this is a major star stepping into a role that is highlighting HIV, but it's still tied to that same tragedy, and it also ties not only to just tragedy because of this path or this journey that he took to bring awareness to how AIDS was being treated and so on and so forth, but he was having unprotected sex and was a womanizer and a bigot and so on and so forth, and it's almost like you kind of got what you deserved is
Yeah.
weaved throughout the story.
Yeah.
It's Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen
Yeah,
got
yeah.
the exact same thing,
Yeah.
and he got vilified, whether you like him or not.
Mhm.
his behavior didn't necessarily mean, oh, well, that's why you get HIV. No,
Right.
no.
That behavior
His
is-
behavior is his behavior. HIV is just a virus
Yeah.
that does whatever a
It's
virus
gonna do.
decides to do.
Right.
Well, as much as they decide to do things.
Right.
And that's a come I always like to mention. I know that this is really going back on nerd cred here, but I mean, that's why I always like to mention Isaac Asimov, that he died of AIDS because nobody realizes that. And
No, I
this
didn't
is
know
like
that.
the last,
Yeah.
this is like the last person anybody would expect to be dying of AIDS.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a blood transfusion, but still kept secret because of the whole stigma of everything
It's
else.
a stigma.
And
It's a
he
huge
was known for
He was
being
womanized.
flirty
He
with.
was a woman.
Yeah.
Being flirty is
His-
really, really playing that down.
Well,
As much as died from AIDS.
Yeah.
No, he was a womanizer.
But I mean, so there still is that whole image thing as he was pointing out. Yes.
So to Tom's point
And,
about,
okay, by the way, I just have to say this. He has notes.
I know, it's
I watched
I was
movies.
going to use the internet, but I couldn't get
Oh,
on.
I'm
it.
so-
Yeah,
I'm
it's
so
like
tickled.
You know, I
was
spent
so
time. I
fucking
actually
notes.
confused my talk and was thinking it was around just LGBTQ, and I was looking at the thing. I was like, oh, it's around HIV. Well, better watch more movies. So I watched a lot of movies about it. And I'd seen plenty, and I'd seen a lot of documentaries on it. And it doesn't matter if it is cinema-based storytelling or documentary-based storytelling. It all has the same kind of delivery. It's all the kind of story of hope around tragedy, or this type of behavior got these people in this position. But to your point, Tom, it is, I believe, is a cultural thing. It's a Western culture versus non-Western culture. So that can be, there could be Eastern cultures that also stigmatize it. And I will say that there are non-Western cultures that still stigmatize it, but it's within that stigmatization, it is still more normalized than it is here. Point in case being Africa. A lot of Africans still live with the stigma, a large stigma over them, but the way that it is discussed in society is much more normalized. And I would be interested to actually look at some of the content and see if there is, just a sitcom based around people who have AIDS, because not like look at all these people who have AIDS, but characters just have AIDS because in their real life people just have AIDS.
Right.
So normalized, isn't it one of the African nations that has their version of Sesame Street? One of the Muppets has AIDS.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
And
And I
it's
think
so,
it was Uganda,
we
I
would,
think.
we would, oh my God, we would die of apoplectic shock if we had that happen here.
Well, there's another.
But it's not a normal thing. It's normalized
Yeah, but
discussion.
there's another side to that too, in that when Tom said, do you think it's cultural? And I said, I'm not gonna talk about the other cultures. There's a huge cultural appropriation backlash that goes on. And right now, people, and by people I mean creatives, are getting attacked for how dare you write about XYZ when you aren't XYZ.
Yes.
Which is patently ridiculous. However, it's real. That backlash is real. There are people that are real, and they choose their cause, whatever it is that they're going to be upset about, and that's what they attack you for. So, for example, I have a friend who, in one of her series, her lead character is deaf, and she has been attacked and actually been removed from panels because she's not deaf, so how dare she write about a deaf person? That would basically say that Marlene Matlin is the only actress that can play a deaf person anymore, because how dare somebody else appropriate that? So there's a lot of that out there, and you have to weigh that of, do I want to risk any form of that backlash by having someone start attacking me for having the nerve to put in an HIV character and possibly not give every single solitary fact about it that person thinks needs to be in the book. And then now I'm in the midst of this gigantic brouhaha for no reason other than, okay, well, I tried to include it and be inclusive and add that in. Well, I'm now culturally appropriating. You don't know what's going to come, but you know it's out there. So it's easier, and it's much easier, to not bring in anything controversial, to walk that line of, could that person be? Maybe. Do my characters, as I walk through, it's like, well, do you have a dread disease? Kind of thing. Do I want to tell anybody about it?
Are you
No.
going to problems with interference with like editors and whatnot, or publisher not wanting
Your
you
editor
to
can
use?
absolutely make the choice of telling you, I don't think this is going to go well. Your publisher can say, no, this is going to be too incendiary, we don't want to do it. Most of them, by the way, are very supportive if you really feel strongly about it. They will back you on those things. But if your editor's like, this just feels like we stopped and had our very special episode, and now we've moved on. There's no reason. See, the other thing too is that you have to have a reason for sharing somebody's information, unless you're making your main character HIV. Depending on how you're doing your storytelling, a lot of my writing is from first person. We only know what my main character knows because that's whose POV we're doing it from. If you're going to other POVs, you can't share from that person's perspective. The issue is, though, how much is that character sharing with other people? It's not normally what you walk up to somebody and go, hi, I'm Gini and I've got this, and oh, by the way, I'm an asthmatic. Why would I lead with that? There's no reason. Now, if I'm in a forest fire area, I need to grab somebody and say I'm an asthmatic and I'm allergic to smoke. I need oxygen because that's going to hit me faster than it's going to hit other people. Then it's legit. But it's not legit for me to just walk in the room and go, hey, everybody, I've got asthma. Because who cares? I'm not wheezing. If I'm wheezing, it's a different story. So there's a lot of that, too.
You've been very quiet over
I
the
have.
Tom, and I know
I've
that
been
you
nodding
have.
a lot.
You've been nodding a lot.
Really excellent
Your head does
nods.
not rattle
Excellent
enough for us to
nods.
pick it up.
Excellent nods. Oh, the
But I
camera's
know-
getting it.
I know that you have actually done quite a few talks about inclusion and stuff like that.
Sure.
So, do you have any?
Well, Ginny's right, first of all. Every time I write a character who is not a straight, white, pseudo-Christian male, whatever, there's going to be a problem. There's going to be flags that go up, whether it's reviewers, whether it's Goodreads, whether it's editors, whatever. People are going to ask questions, and that's a problem. So far, I have not had any problem writing from a female perspective. Like, everyone just accepts that and they move on, and that has not been an issue. I've got a book coming out in January of 2018 where I had one of my agents, when I was writing the book, as we were discussing it, she goes, well, now this character, she's transgender, right? I was like, I don't know. Is she? Why is it? That has no relevance whatsoever to the plot. Like, well, I know. Well, yeah, no, I understand. But is she? Like, wow, that has absolutely nothing to do with the story being told here. So I'm not going to answer you that. I'm just not going to. Furthermore, very recently, as a matter of fact, I had a certain publication, which I'll remain nameless, take time out of its review to say, oh, by the way, he doesn't name any of the races of the characters, so they're all white, or they're presumably all white. And I was like, well, now I understand why that's culturally accurate. There's a whole reason, we default to that. I get that. I don't know why that was pointed out. It has nothing at all whatsoever to do with the book. So we do have that issue.
We get it a lot.
We get it a lot.
Well, a
but
lot
I
of
think-
times it's even given as a recommendation to not include those descriptions so that it can be any race.
Yes, and that's what I've
Yes.
started doing, and I got nailed for it. So when I
Yeah.
used to do it, I got nailed for it. I stopped, I got nailed for it. So
Basically,
now I'm just going to do it.
Exactly.
Basically, you have to do what you want to do,
Yeah.
but it's difficult, and so now it moves into, well, what do you want to do?
Mhm.
Just be sure you don't Tolkien it up and make all of your bad guys ethnic.
Yeah, that tends to be a little
But
frowned
I
upon,
also
but
think, from where I'm coming from at this point in my career, having published exclusively for young people, that comes up a lot because we are the young adult group of authors nationwide, and I'm sure globally even, takes our responsibility to our readership extremely seriously. Because they're children, and a lot of them are reading up. So not a lot of 18-year-olds are reading my stuff, but a lot of 11 and 12-year-olds are, even though it's 14 and up, right? They all read up, and we take that very, very seriously. And we do take, I think, inclusion very, very seriously because there are so many. There's just so damn many of us. We look different, we feel different, all these things, But we run that risk of like, well, can I write a character that is HIV positive? Can I write a character who is in any other way differently able than I am, or that comes from a different background or whatever? And it's scary as hell because people get really bent. But most of the responses, I think, are generally positive, and it makes me, I mean, just being on a panel like this is making me think like, yeah, I haven't had that character. I've worked in different genders, different races, different sexualities and whatnot, and that's great. I haven't worked with this before. I've never really worked in an HIV or other, you know.
But I think if you have
serious
somebody
disease,
who's got a terrible disease of some kind or terrible disease of some
Mhm.
kind, I think that if you wrote that in as kind of part of their description, you know, and then you have the power to normalize that character into the
Yeah.
world that they exist in. You don't have to highlight the fact they have HIV all the time. It could just
Yeah.
be something that simply sits there under the surface a bit.
I agree.
But there are expectations, readers have them, editors have them,
Right.
publishers have them. The Chekhov,
Yeah.
if the gun's mentioned on the mantle, you gotta use it by the third act. If you point out that someone has HIV, AIDS, cancer, Hep C, you name it, and that's it, what you've done is you're doing almost a tokenism thing. Yeah, they've got HIV, AIDS, and I'm never gonna bring it up again.
No, you're
Okay,
right. You're right.
I'm never
Of
gonna
course
bring it
not.
up again. It's there. It shouldn't be brought up unless it's relevant, and that's the issue,
But-
okay? Because you get called out for that. So if you're bringing it up, there are ways to do it. It has to fit your story, okay? Where it's like, well, why isn't Joe coming? He's not feeling good today. He's just not up to it. Why
Well,
isn't he up to it? Well, you know, he's had kind of a little relapse.
That's kind of where I was going with
Right.
that. So if it's mentioned in that description as it's a part of that character,
Yeah.
Right.
then it could be that maybe that character, it could be a teenager, if you're writing for a young adult, it could be a teenager, and that kid is being, you know, not alienated to the nth degree, like that it becomes this big bomb in
Yeah.
the book, but maybe there's just a little bit of alienation at school. Like just
Right.
part of this character, it comes out here and there, but so when I'm talking about normalization, it's part of that character, like some other kid that might be overweight is being teased at school. This kid's being alienated by some kids that don't
But that
quite.
has to be the story you want to tell, and that's the other part of it.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
do it, but it has to be, it literally has to be part of the story. In the third book in my main series, the Alien series, Alien and the Family, we find out that one of the major supporting characters came from Las Vegas. You don't find that out until the third book, because it was not relevant to
Okay.
mention until then. So part of the issue is like, is this something that you can bring up here? Is it something that's gonna come up? Does the character want you to talk about it? You know, I mean, there is a lot of that, so.
Because I totally agree with you on the storytelling aspect.
Yeah.
And I'm a stickler for story and for structure and things like that and having reasons for all of these things. But, question now. Are we so, is storytelling as a whole, and we're all storytellers on this panel in one way, shape, or form, is storytelling so ingrained in us by this point that we can't have end HIV or whatever, we can't put that descriptor in there because it throws everybody off so much, or do we have a responsibility to start shifting
That's where
storytelling
I'm
to that?
That,
Well, I
I
think
actually
there
have
is
to
that.
agree with
Yeah.
because
I
there
that's
comes
not
a certain
that's not
point.
an answer I'm asking.
Yeah,
idea.
there comes a certain point where.
We have to drive the paradigm shift.
Right. What is the difference between, especially given the fact that HIV is not a death sentence?
Right.
So what is the difference between mentioning, oh, he's HIV positive, or oh, she has freckles, which means oh, she's sensitive to sunlight and everything. I know there's
Because
such a-
HIV positive does not show freckles, I can see them on your face. There's a distinct difference in that in order for someone to know,
But it doesn't serve your story to tell me one way or the other if she has freckles.
It
But
does
you can do.
if I'm just, no, because freckles, they are not the same. You are,
But
no,
why
there's
are they not
trait,
the same?
because one is an external trait used to describe someone so you can differentiate them and how they look from the other characters, which you cannot do visually because it's a written medium, and the other is an internal thing that is similar to personality, likes and dislikes. That's something that I'm not gonna casually walk up and go, and you know, Edward, his hair is shorter than I was used to. He's cut his goatee down too. He's wearing a very nice jacket. Oh, and he has HIV/AIDS.
That's fair. Yeah.
That's
That's how I
never
introduce myself
going
on
to
a daily basis.
I know.
Okay,
So
so-
again, what you're talking about is an internal thing, not an external. It is an apples to kind
So
of.
a way
Okay,
that
I
you,
do
a
see-
way that you
I see
could
what you're
build,
saying.
a way that you could build into that description, into the character throughout the story would be to, in your initial description of that character, perhaps, because there are some externalizations of having HIV, this particular character does, sometimes, right, sometimes, so not all the
Well,
times,
if I
I'm saying
have-
sometimes that is a
Yeah.
case. So you could just drop just a telltale that is a known, sometimes occurring externalization of it, and then later on, you could then build into a reveal
I
of.
could, but
If
my
that was
books aren't
short.
about that, and that's
Right.
not my, that's the
Right,
issue.
but
No, no,
Not
no.
necessarily your book.
I'm not talking
Yes,
about
some-
necessarily your
it-
books.
Craft-wise, yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of ways. Well, here's the thing though.
Sorry, I'm just
Which-
talking
no,
in
but
general.
you're right, you're right,
about-
you are correct. Here's the issue, that's how you filter things in. Here's the issue though. Everyone, or enough of us, have to feel comfortable that by doing that, we're not gonna have a horrific backlash that now, instead of somebody talking about our book, they're talking about one aspect of our book that is so minuscule that, quite frankly, if I did that and my editor said, I don't know why it's here, it's gone, okay? So it's a difficult thing. The reason why things like Philadelphia, things like Angels in America can get, Longtime Companion, why those things can get made is because they are focused on the disease. And so everything that relates to it makes sense. I don't know that you could do Philadelphia and have that movie be anything if he isn't going through the stages of HIV/AIDS. Okay, that movie doesn't make any sense if you pull the disease out.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I'll say is those are like 20-year-old, plus movies.
Right.
I'm looking at recent times of media, and kind of the three things I can think of, or actually a couple things I can think of HIV representation is Normal Heart from HBO.
Right.
Just watch that.
Excellent question.
Because you were
I
researching.
mentioned that. I mentioned that.
And Dallas Buyers Club's probably the only other thing I
Right.
can think of in popular media in a very long time, and it's really done as a dramatization of.
But
Yeah.
they all tie back to that
It's a dread disease.
dread disease.
Yes.
There's some
Yes.
tragedy, romanticizing. They all tie back to those conventions for telling a story about AIDS.
Well,
Yes,
I'm
'cause
just
it's a
thinking, I'm not
disease of
seeing
weak
anything else in
spleen.
media.
There isn't. There's
I can-
very little.
Why?
Well, I can, but why?
Why
Here's
are
the,
we naming it?
I can, okay, comic books. I'm a nerd, fine, are you done? Comic books were actually surprisingly progressive in addressing the idea of HIV. DC Comics, they had one of their characters in one of the big launches, failure, but it was a big launch. One of their characters, he was HIV positive. One of the lead comic books that came out of Image, which was a huge thing at the beginning of the 90s, okay, huge. They talked about it on nighttime TV and everything. One of those characters stuck around for years from the very foundation was HIV positive.
What character is that?
Shadowhawk.
Oh.
Shadowhawk is
did not know
HIV
that.
positive. That is actually his motivation for going out because he gets some gang members, they're like mafia gang, like they infect him with the disease and then he's like gonna take them down before he dies because there's a tragic story.
Yeah, right
and it goes
back.
like, but and I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I'm just saying that these things have been being addressed even earlier on, and even comic books have figured out ways, like Green Arrow, his sidekick Speedy, not the original heroin addict Speedy, but the later female HIV positive Speedy, that was just a thing.
Just there.
That was just
Yeah.
there. And yes, it became relevant once or twice, but in general, she just had HIV.
Yeah.
That was her thing. Milestone Comics, they did, I can't remember the name of the character, Earl.
Most people can't remember Milestone
I
Comics.
love those. They were the best, the only good comics.
Like Mile High Comics.
But, now we're just getting a comic book.
Yeah, sorry.
But, like,
That's our next panel.
but there
discussion.
is ways that you can do it. And are there certain forms of media that you think can actually do this more easily than
Television.
others?
If you look back at soap, and yeah, I'm bringing up really old things because you know why? Because without Longtime Companion and without soap, you don't get the Normal Heart.
Well, the normal
without-
part was a stage play first. to be
Right, but
fair.
you don't get all of these other things without longtime companion.
Agreed.
Okay, so you have to go back because we're talking about trying to make breakthroughs, and those are breakthroughs. Okay, because nobody talked about it. Billy Crystal's character on Soap was the first representation of a gay man on network television in prime time.
As a regular.
As a regular,
As a regular.
ever.
And
It's
not a
not
daddy
somebody
that
to
got killed.
die, it's not somebody to die tragically or, come off and be the weird killer. Literally as a regular name in the credits character. Were there caricatures from him? Sure, of course, but still, you got to see this character living reasonably normally. It was a comedy, so everything's hyper-realized, everything's played more for a laugh and everything else. But without that, you don't get to Will and Grace, and without Will and Grace, you don't get to where characters are just able to be gay, even though we're still miles away from where we want to be. So, one of the positives in literature right now is there's a lot of male-male, and it's going to have to be mostly male-male. I realize that women get this disease. I realize straight people get this disease, et cetera, et cetera. The majority of people walking around with HIV/AIDS are gay men, and therefore,
I work
that's
for Maricopa County Testing.
where-
That's a category that you do subcategories in.
Yeah.
Women, females who get it from women or what, and straight and drug users,
Yeah.
they're all just a category.
Right, just
Wow.
everybody else, yes.
Male for male. Oh, were you also an intravenous drug user? Were
Right,
you also
yeah.
that? Then they
Okay.
even said that because it is such a big
It is
category.
big, so
that is
there's,
valid.
male-male romance is huge, okay? And many authors of those kind of romances are willing to deal with this kind of subject matter because it affects their characters and it can be part of their characters very, very, very easily. Now, that is a subgenre of literature. It's a very popular one. It's probably the number one in erotica, okay, is male-male. And it's, by the way, mostly written by women, mostly read by women. Doesn't matter, because those people vote and those people affect and those people turn around and watch television shows. I really do feel like television can do this well. I think the challenge is when you mentioned the comic, the most important word I heard was launch. They started with this character. It's easier to start, it would be easier for me to go in and write a new story about characters that have this than fit it into an existing series.
But Green
in a
Arrow,
way.
it was done well after the launch.
Oh, yeah.
Right,
It was
yeah,
well.
Yeah,
But, okay, and I hate to do this. We are kind of hitting a time limit. I'm really surprised we don't have people like singing over top of us.
Nice.
I do want to mention one more. First of all, do you think that there's a genre
I was
that's
actually
a
thinking
media?
about it. I would actually go out on a limb here and say middle grade and young adult fiction. And the reason is middle grade, the defining line between middle grade and young adult that I've heard described is that in middle grade, the characters don't lose their fundamental innocence. They still retain sort of an innocent view of the world. Whereas in YA, oh no, it's gone. Bye-bye. But there's some amazing, amazing work being done in middle grade. The book that came to mind was a book called Mockingbird. And it's told from the point of view of a girl who I believe is somewhere on the autism spectrum, and so she can't, connect with people at all. And to read a story from someone's point of view like that, I believe it was first person, it was heartbreaking and amazing and so sensitive. And I think particularly even middle grade over young adult, I think, and I think launch is a good word to use here, I think you can launch something in that arena because those readers and the people who are talking to those readers, who are teachers, librarians, people like that, can handle material like that so sensitively and so warmly, and with such great compassion and love, that I think there's lots of room for something like that because they're living it. They are living it. That's the thing people don't appreciate about kids. They're little people. Like no, we're people.
Adults.
And yeah,
Small.
so yeah.
Do you think that there's a media platform or a genre platform that?
I have two things I'd like to get in before we get out of here. One is regarding platform and regarding launch versus integration. I feel like things like Amazon Prime and Netflix are, from a film and television perspective, a really great platform. The first thing that comes to mind for me that they can actually integrate into this storyline is Sense8, which is the Wachowski
Yeah.
sisters now.
Yeah.
They have a trans character. They have gay characters that are in loving relationships. They have some that are in kind of love triangles, but they have normalized it throughout the story. I really don't know anybody, and this is across friends that are religious, friends that aren't, all comic book fans and sci-fi fans, and they love the story. Like, it's just a good story, and it connects, and it's not only diverse in its sexual orientation and its gender identification, it's also diverse culturally. It takes place across the globe. It is, if you've not watched it, I highly recommend it. Sense 8,
Yeah.
it's amazing. My other thing is, and you might have a little bit of insight on this since you work for Maricopa County, I was listening to NPR.
I don't anymore. I haven't for years.
That's fine. Just from a perspective standpoint.
Not excusing myself and just letting you know I haven't for a long time.
So when you look at a lot of the material that's coming out within the last 10 years, be it documentary or film, it is all telling that tragic story and romanticizing the tragic disease through the framing of the time period when it was most regarded by American culture as an epidemic.
Exactly.
And so my point is, on NPR, this was yesterday, they were talking about how the HIV rates are starting to slowly climb in Maricopa County, and because of complacency, because people feel comfortable, and there is no longer this framing of an epidemic. Even in Africa, where it is still, by our standards, epidemic, it is no longer as seen as the epidemic as it was. So it's leading to complacency, and therefore rates are kind of climbing a little bit.
So
I
I
was
think
thinking the same
post-cocktail
thing.
is not much mentioned in media, and in fact, if you take a look at it, as we mentioned, Dallas Buyers Club,
Mhm.
those are both referencing, again, pre-cocktail
Yeah.
period. And, there really isn't much mention of that.
It felt to me when you brought that up, the thing that came to mind was a sense of sort of mashup, like, wait, did we take care of that? Did we fix that?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Is
no,
that over
no,
yet?
no.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
And yet
but
the
that- you're
stigma is
exactly
still
right.
there.
Yeah.
And yet the stigma is still there.
Yeah.
I mean, I guarantee if I taught, and this is not insulting my editor or publisher at all, if I toss that in without having some form of payoff for it, there's gonna be the why is this here?
Yeah.
So it's gotta make sense for your story too, but I think we need those stories.
I do personally think that there is a media right now, or actually a genre right now that is addressing it, however symbolically. Horror typically mirrors
Yeah.
society's concerns. Everyone keeps on going, when are we going to be done with the zombie stories? When are we going to be done with the zombie stories? We're not, because the zombie stories represent HIV, they represent measles, they represent Hep C, they
Cancer, they
represent,
represent all the diseases.
well, they represent contagion.
Yeah.
So not as much cancer, they
Because you can't
represent,
catch it, yeah.
yeah, it's the contagious diseases, and as long as those are still there, we're not gonna get those witch stories that people were predicting was gonna be the next big thing. We're not gonna get those, no,
You're right,
we're gonna
yeah.
get those zombies, because
Right.
we're still,
It can
even
happen.
as we're
It
getting
can happen.
complacent, even though we're getting
Yeah.
complacent and getting relaxed about it, we still, underneath it all, as a society, have a fear of it, that it could happen at any moment, at
Yeah.
any time. And you can tell good stories, bad stories, positives, whatever, within that genre.
Yeah.
I don't think we're seeing that as much right now. I think we're seeing lazy stories right now.
Well, I think you have to be very careful. If I was gonna write a horror story where everybody has AIDS, that's.
Well, no, but I mean, but if they're all zombies, well, that's really what they're representing. They're representing them all having a virus of some sort.
I agree with
infection.
that, I agree with that, but then the issue is, unless it's, here's the thing, unless you're overtly saying this person has HIV/AIDS, being general about it's contagious and this and that, I can choose, therefore as the reader or the watcher or the listener or whatever, to view it as whatever disease scares me the most, not the disease we actually are trying to normalize. And I also feel like, again, making, we have AIDS turned everyone into zombies is not where I want that to go necessarily.
I agree.
I think it's,
I just think
what we
he's
need to
saying it
get
could
is-
be an analogy for
Yeah,
any,
it can,
for
but
any.
it can, but I mean, I
I-
just
I-
don't know that that's helping.
Oh, I agree. I don't know if it's helping or not. that part. I think it could be done in a helpful way. I think most authors are addressing it in a real way at all recently. I think most of them just go, I'm making a zombie story, and it's my own voice, and I'm going, it's a zombie story. We've seen zombie stories. I don't care about your voice. It has to be about something.
Yeah.
But that's my 2 cents worth. But there was a movie that came out just last year called It Follows.
Uh-huh.
It is not a zombie story.
That's the
but
sex one, right?
That's the one where you get basically cursed with a death creature that follows you
Until you have
after you
sex.
fall. After you have sex with someone who was cursed with someone, and the
you
only
have
way
to
to
have
move
sex.
the curse on is
Is
to have sex with someone else. And I still think that actually is referring to the AIDS scares that we have of people of back in the 80s and 90s of, oh, someone's going to go out and deliberately infect someone because they were
Yeah.
infected by someone who
Right.
deliberately. And
That's
I think
all
that's an
this, but
extension
that's
of
STD too.
Well, I was
Yeah,
gonna say
it's
that
also
that
STD.
complacency, I think, is driven by people think, and maybe even the idea of we aren't in that epidemic anymore is fostered by the media not reporting it and not really talking about it in the national conversation, but the stigma on STDs in general is so incredibly great that people don't talk about it. And now with HIV, that is not a death sentence. It is something that you can carry and manage, and so you don't have to talk about it. And so, no one's talking about the STDs that, look at herpes. 1 in 3 people have it,
Is
horrible.
easily endangered.
And back to I work for the county, as something that does not get trickled out into the general public, but it is amongst the professional public. HIV is not an STD.
Right.
It is not counted as an STD. It is not categorized as one. It is spoken about in different areas. They test in a different area and all that. It is separate. But in the general consciousness, it is still considered an STD. And this is where I'm going to start wrapping things up because we got up. But I want one last thought. But think of something positive. Think of what you think could be positively done media-wise, realistically too. Something that someone could do realistically next week or next year.
I
in
think
media.
Tom could write his middle grade book.
I could
Yeah,
write
Tom
that.
could write his middle grade
Tom
book.
could
Much
write
shorter
this
word,
one. Next week.
much shorter word count, not too bad. I think that it's a great question. I think the very first thing that comes to mind is we didn't have the social media access that we did in the 80s and 90s, and now we do. So I think honest people telling authentic stories in short little bits, whether I think video is good. I would love to hear Patrick's opinion on that. But short blog type things, or just sharing an honest, authentic story about what you are dealing with or what someone you care about is dealing with, and sharing it that way.
I think it's brilliant.
She's got
I'm thinking.
Oh, she's still thinking,
I'm
okay.
still thinking.
And you have notes, so we
I
can expect you to
I
do that.
through my
You're
notes, those are
done.
done. I think that as we were talking, you kind of come back to the backlash. The backlash ultimately, in my opinion, as a creator of things, it can be harnessed as a positive. Someone will have to bear that burden.
Yeah.
Many someones will absolutely have to push that dialogue forward and to push that narrative into a more normal space.
Have I mentioned he's an activist?
Have we
No,
mentioned,
but you're absolutely right.
mentioned
Yeah.
that every single media personality who you approached said they couldn't come because they could not afford the stigma?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's why I spoke
But
about that the other day.
ultimately, it might take those who
It
aren't
always-
attached to that stigma to, and really, that would make sense. Why, if I'm the closed-minded individual who is stigmatizing those, or who is making those who feel stigmatized aware of that stigma, then me as the normal guy who doesn't have XYZ, if I'm out there advocating and being a voice for those people to tell stories of their normalcy, then it will open the minds of those who I don't know that's it. I don't have a family member or necessarily I may have friends that might be affected by it, but I'm not personally affected by it. but it is important to me that the humanity of those who are affected by it be I guess laid bare for those who think that those who carry this or that might be less human. That, you know, I don't know. That's
My positive then, based on that, would be do an AIDS version of People in New York.
I'm working on. I was talking about that. I'm working on some stuff. I'm working on some stuff.
I think a lot of, yes, the normal community has to do it too, but I think the activism, if the activism is not coming from the community affected, then it will never be fully successful. It will always be looked at as, oh, that's your pet cause, but those people,
Okay.
wow, we're done, okay. Well, that was the one minute.
There we go.
Those people,
Yeah,
don't-
we're
those
working.
people aren't doing anything for themselves, so why should I bother? I think it needs to be concerted together, and the more of us that can work together to try to do that, the better.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Well, I thank you all for coming out tonight.
Rich wants us to leave.
And as you can tell, it's time for us to wrap this up.
No one else.
So, yay!
Yay.
Thank